Welcome. We're just letting some people filter in here. For a few more participants to hop out of the weight room, and we'll get started. All right, well, 12:31 by my watch, so we'll get started. Good morning. I'm Pat Lawton. I'm the Business Director for the Defense Alliance. I want to welcome you to the North Dakota Defense Industry Sector Update webinar. It's a mouthful. Thank you for being here today. We have a great hour of information ahead of us and some great presenters you can see on your screen here, but before we get started, we'll just cover a few logistical items. So first off, as you probably noticed, in order to ensure the sound quality for the webinar, all attendees are going to be muted and will remain so throughout the webinar. Secondly, again, for that sound integrity, we're not going to be doing any live Q&A during the presentations, but I would encourage you to submit questions through the question box or reach out through the chat. I'll be monitoring that and facilitating it. And if we need to weave in or include any comments or questions during the webinar, I'll be in charge of that. So time permitting, we'll see how it goes. But if we have time, we'll open up the mics at the end to do a live Q&A. If we run out of time and we're unable to get to your questions somehow, I'll be keeping a record of what you're asking and we'll follow up with you via email to ensure that your questions get answered. So lastly, I just want to remind you that the webinar is being recorded. This is good news. It will be available to you on the Defense Alliance website, and you'll receive a follow-up email with the deck as well as the recording link. And I think that's all the housekeeping items I have. So with those details out of the way, I'm going to pass it over to Amy Whitney to get things started. Amy is the Director of the Center of Innovation at the University of North Dakota. So Amy, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Pat. Welcome, everyone, and we're glad that you are here joining us today. I am one of a few speakers that will be presenting on the North Dakota defense industry sector and what is the culmination of a 2-year project that we were fortunate enough to be the lead agency on, but would not have been possible without a large contingent of stakeholders from all across North Dakota and even into Minnesota that really worked on this project. So what are we going to talk about today? So here's our agenda of what we will be looking at today. There will be an opportunity for us to really look at the state of the industry and look at a SWOT analysis of the North Dakota defense industry sector. We'll also be talking about cybersecurity training, and then there was a large summary report that has some strategic recommendations on resiliency efforts and a strategic vision for the North Dakota defense industry sector. And to do that, it'll be myself, and then we have other presenters. We have Chip Langen, Jody Moan, Norbert Biederman, and Joe Craig, who will be part of the conversation today. The slides that you will see today will be available to you after the webinar. We will make sure that we distribute them along with a link to the recording. So sit back and don't feel like you have to take copious notes because we will provide them to you after today's webinar. So I'm going to open us up with a little bit of some high-level picture and vision of what this project entailed. And the purpose of this particular project was to really look at how could we enhance North Dakota's role in national security and ensure that the industry sector really has a lot of resiliency built into it, that is forward facing and is able to really respond to the ever-changing fast-paced world, and a world that, you know, we're looking at an industrial revolution that is changing. And so how do we as a state look to do that? And also make sure that we're doing that in a way that meets all the requirements for cybersecurity, because in the defense sector, cybersecurity is really important, and making sure that we know what resources we need and that we will have them available and there for us to take advantage of, and that we're prepared. And then what and how might we use our opportunities in the defense sector to support the adjacent industries that are value adds that we know we're really strong in here in North Dakota, whether that's agriculture, energy, autonomy, uncrewed air systems. What does that look like, and how can we use the defense sector to support those industries that we are strong in here in North Dakota? And then also thinking about making sure that our supply chain and our sectors are connected as much as possible. So connectivity was a big theme of this particular funding that we received from OLDCC through the Department of Defense. So with that, and understanding the purpose of why we are here, it's really an important next step is to think about what those deliverables were. So already mentioned, there was a SWOT analysis that was completed by Batra Incorporated, and that our grant advisory committee spent a lot of time working with them on to really understand the North Dakota defense sector. We also spent a good amount of time addressing cybersecurity barriers and the requirements that are part of doing business with the defense industry sector. So Chip will spend some time talking about the SWOT analysis, and then Jody's going to really talk about what we learned from the work we did around cybersecurity. And then we'll actually turn to this other deliverable towards the end of the webinar that allowed us to create this front door and a single online portal that really focuses on connectivity. And then what is that, and how might this enable us to become a more connected industry sector and enable those support agencies that are part of that supply chain to all connect better. And then we'll also talk about the recommendations. One unanticipated, really awesome outcome of this particular project is the Grant Advisory Committee. So there were 18 members, and many, a good number of them are on this call today, and thank you for your continued support. But this effort was not just something that was a Center for Innovation project. This was truly a community of stakeholders all across this state who truly came together and developed this coordinated vision towards a path forward. And we really look forward to continuing to support this new collaborative ecosystem of stakeholders as we look to hopefully move all of these recommendations forward. And so with that, Chip, I'm actually going to turn it over to you to start talking about and what we learned through the state of the industry and our SWOT analysis.
Thanks, Amy, and good morning, everyone, from Minneapolis, St. Paul, where Defense Alliance is centered. And we spent a lot of time working with Amy in the University of North Dakota, CFI, and as Amy said, with the Grant Advisory Committee up in North Dakota. And it's been a great pleasure to see, to echo Amy's point, the level of collaboration and interest in this industry sector, because there's a lot of belief that we can improve on the record that we already have, which is pretty substantial. We'll start with the kind of the state of the industry itself, that being the defense industry sector in North Dakota. And I'd say that when we talk about the defense sector, there's different sort of definitions of that, right? It's defense and aerospace, it's high technology, it's federal contracting. There's a lot of defense sector spending or activity that has, as most of you know, multiple uses across multiple market areas. And so that's an important aspect of the industry as we look to link this industry with other market sectors in North Dakota, which are also growing in exciting ways, like ag tech and autonomy generally. The Pentagon Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, every 2 years, I believe it is, updates the data on where the states are in terms of their position with a lot of different ranking statistics in the industry. And you'll notice that, like, one of these bullets here, North Dakota is 51st. So we're not last, we're less than last. And that's because this ranking includes the District of Columbia as well. Overall, the state itself, about 1.7% of the state's gross domestic product is defense related. That puts the state 32nd out of 51. Because there's two obviously large Air Force bases, a significant Guard, Air Force and Army in the state, there's roughly 14,000 personnel that are actively involved, and folks that we like to call our customers, right, that we're serving ultimately, the folks on those bases across the state. It's a sizable number of personnel, and you'll see that a lot of the spending in the state is salary related. In terms of total spending on defense, we are 45th in the nation of 815 million, roughly. Not a huge number, but the good news is since about 2017, that's about a 15% increase. So the trajectory is in the right direction. And then, as I mentioned, we're 45th there, but you'll see we're 51st in total contract spending. What that really means is if you take federal contracting writ large beyond just defense, compared to other states, we drop in that category down to last. And again, the good news is there's plenty of opportunities to grow, especially with the significant effort in autonomy, AI, machine learning, and frankly, the growth of manufacturing in North Dakota, which is again, a nice trajectory upward. Next slide, please. So as Amy mentioned, the Batra folks, contractor for the first part of this grant from OLDCC, included a significant SWOT analysis where we looked at a lot for all the stakeholders in North Dakota, the industry itself, and what the trajectory really is and what it could be. In terms of strengths and opportunities, obviously you mentioned there's significant military installations in the state, and a very well-known and well-regarded National Guard presence, which has done overseas duty, obviously. Significant strengths in terms of just connection to the community and understanding of what that customer is doing for us. And then second, as a major strength, the community and political support that comes with that is huge. And again, as I mentioned, we're based in Minneapolis-St. Paul. We do a lot of work, Defense Alliance does, in 36 states, and we work with regional economies in really 2 or 3 in a significant way in other states. But we've never experienced the level of cooperation and just positive outlook like we have in North Dakota. Nord Biederman, who you'll hear from in a few minutes here, we always go up there and say, we just end up leaving saying, man, it's the culture of yes up there in North Dakota. And that's a huge strength as we move forward. There are, of course, weaknesses. Workforce is an issue, frankly, nationwide. In North Dakota, it's fairly acute given the population, the ability to retain high-tech employees, and looking at the workforce we need for the future around autonomy, manufacturing, and key industries like artificial intelligence, machine learning. There is significant work to be done there in North Dakota to figure out how to develop, retain, and grow that base of workforce. And then secondly, cybersecurity is a huge issue. The good news here is we're not alone. The entire nation, in the high-tech sphere especially, and even more so among small business, has a huge challenge in terms of securing the data technology that we have because of the cybersecurity threats that are all around us. And you'll hear some of the efforts we have in place from Jody Moen here in a second. And then recommendations that came out of the SWOT. I think the biggest piece of this was the need to not just grow the defense sector itself, but to keep the stakeholders that are ensuring this growth connected, collaborative, working toward the same goals. In the past 2 years have really cemented that effort, I think, which is great. Another recommendation was to build a cybersecurity center of excellence, focus on that, as that is a huge problem. And then also figure out how to invest in the workforce, whether it be industry itself investing or the state, at specific targeted workforce needs that we have as we go forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jody Moen of Impact Dakota, which is the state's manufacturing extension partnership, and so much more. It's been a great pleasure working with Impact Dakota and you specifically, Jody. Over to you, sir.
Super duper. Thanks, Chip. Great information. So on the cybersecurity activity, we're actually part, like Chip said, part of the manufacturing extension partnership under NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, and that's where the NIST standard is flowed down through defarge clauses to government contracting. Through government contracting, that's where the NIST standard is developed. So what we did is we actually conducted workshops in 4 cities. We used the BACHA study and we identified the 4 greatest concentrations of government contracting. And they were Fargo, Grand Forks, Minot, and Bismarck, kind of to no surprise. But, and we set up workshops in each of those cities in 4 consecutive days. So we went from one to the next and did those full-day workshops. In those sessions, we had folks from multiple sectors and of the industries, like Amy had mentioned at the introduction. We had them in military and commercial manufacturing, certainly. We had universities, we had construction, agriculture, food producers, and then utility companies, all present during those workshops throughout those different cities. In those workshops, we went through the standard, talked about what it takes to comply with the requirements, give everybody an introduction and a good understanding to increase the resiliency and the knowledge of the organizations that are doing government contracting and those that are interested in going down that path. Out of that, we ended up having the recommendations for continuing on the cybersecurity training investments by doing additional education through workshops similar to like we had. We found them to be located throughout the different regions in North Dakota, helped draw everybody to be able to attend at least one of those sessions in their area geographically. Increased awareness of government contracting opportunities. So that's getting the folks together to be able to kind of talk through and identify where the opportunities are at, what it takes to go into the business doing that, developing those business-to-business exchange programs with the government contracting prime OEMs in the state, as well as the Air Force bases, as well as the National Guard and those opportunities that are there. So setting up those introductory meetings to be able to introduce everybody to each other and identify how to help meet those needs. And then evaluating business capacity and capabilities in the state, and that is an effort. We had some of the key stakeholders we had involved across the state, being able to kind of share that information and wanting to build that up from a standpoint of being able to have that information readily available for the folks that are looking for that government contracting. Next slide, please. The final grant report, talks about the 5 recommendations for the defense sector position. And here I'll turn it over to Amy, back over to Amy to go ahead and work. She'll present some information on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. So as Jody mentioned, the final large piece of this was to take the work of the SWOT analysis and the work there alongside the work of Impact Dakota and the work that they did around cybersecurity, and really bring it forward and really think about, so what is this strategic plan? And a few things were important about this final report. One was that as we looked at really moving forward and bringing some recommendations, we wanted to make sure of a few things. One being that as a state, we positioned ourselves alongside the national defense industrial base, and that our strategic vision was going to complement that work so that there was forward momentum together rather than separate. The other thing that was important to the committee and the group was that we consider, because this was really focused on supply chain, what are the enablers of that supply chain? And what was really nice to see was that a lot of the work that we had been seeing through the SWOT analysis and the cybersecurity work actually complemented some of the recommendations that were already part of the National Defense Industrial Base, as well as those supply chain enablers. And you'll see some themes coming out here, but those enablers really are around workforce. They're around small business and entrepreneurial supports and how those connect to prime contractors for the Department of Defense. Cyber posture being extremely important, and then thinking about how does all that tie into manufacturing and the manufacturing base. And as part of that manufacturing base, how are we responding and changing to this fourth industrial revolution with all the new technologies that are being developed around machine learning and AI and all those newer technologies that are truly impacting and changing the trajectory of our supply chain, but also just our manufacturing and our technology and business base. So what are those 5 strategic recommendations that came out of this work and the 2 years of work with the Grant Advisory Committee and the contractors that we worked with? And the first recommendation that came forward was that we do believe it is important that there is some kind of a statewide sector champion, and we actually recommend that that sector champion be housed out of the governor's office. And really the point or the important piece of a state level position is that there's a position and a person who, really this is what they do every day. And they bring all those enablers together and really steward the vision for the state. And they have a voice and they're a resource where they're really bringing all of those voices together into the table. And really making sure that they're championing, I'll say that word here if I can, our voice for North Dakota, both at the federal level and then coordinating the state level resources as well. We also believe that that champion should have a deep respect and network at the Department of Defense and a strong understanding of the local North Dakota political and business culture as well. And it's having both of those pieces together that we believe allows for this position to really be consequential to moving this industry sector and continuing the growth that we have been seeing and experiencing here in North Dakota in the last 5 years. As you have heard, right, workforce is a piece. So one of our recommendations is around workforce and our ability to attract, train, and retain that industrial workforce that can sustain and build defense capabilities. So in June 2022, as this project was coming to a conclusion, the unemployment rate here in North Dakota was 2.6%, which is really low and can make things a little bit of a challenge when we're trying to find the right people and the right skills. So as part of this recommendation to attract and train and retain, we believe that our workforce strategies should include a couple things. One of them, making sure that as part of this attraction, training, and retaining, that we identify and support alternative worker recruitment strategies and think about how do we bring new people to North Dakota. And there are efforts underway to do that now, especially if you look to the North Dakota Department of Commerce and the work that they're doing. This is really important for us here in North Dakota, and it's going to be important that we continue to invest in those efforts as we look to the future. We also believe when thinking about workforce that part of this strategy is really making sure that we're mapping and aligning the defense industrial skills that are necessary, not just in the higher education and in upskilling and rescaling work that's going on in some of our great organizations like TrainND and Job Skills, but really how are we doing this K-12 through higher education? So what does that landscape look like? And making sure that we know we've got the right things built into our educational system from early on all the way up through our higher education system, and making sure that we do everything we can to reduce the barriers between those different levels of education and training is going to be vital. One of the great things too, or a piece of this, is thinking about career pathways and continuing to invest in our career and technical education programs and making sure that we're aligning those career and technical education programs with the defense industrial base and the skills that are needed. Many of the skills that we are building into those do transfer, and just thinking about making sure that we know and talk about how they transfer into this particular industrial base. And then thinking too about how are we leveraging any applied learning opportunities, whether that be through co-ops and internships and externships, and really thinking about maximizing those opportunities. So we can take advantage of all opportunities to build our workforce and address that weakness that we saw in our supply chain as part of our SWOT analysis. Our third recommendation, and probably one of the most unexpected that came out of this work, was realizing that for resiliency of the supply chain being in the Midwest, that we could make a very strategic investment in this region that could become a long-term, future-facing critical infrastructure investment that has a long-term impact, not just for North Dakota, but for the Midwest. And looking towards, could we secure a defense logistics agency, supply, storage, and repair facility for this region? Presently, most of your DLA facilities are located on the east and west coasts, which can create some bottlenecks, not just for our installations and our service members that are here, but for all of the related industries, whether that's for our prime contractors or subcontractors, and any organizations that are partnered with these agencies. And so if we were able to secure a DLA facility in the Midwest, and hypothetically, right, we're thinking in North Dakota, it would really allow us to have a mechanism where we can facilitate much stronger local and regional coordination of all of the supply chain needs that are in this region. And that Midwest storage facility would not just impact North Dakota, but you could look to neighboring states all in the region and that whole entire Midwest section of the country, given what's happening right now with those facilities. So that's a recommendation that was very unexpected, but yet something that we felt would really make a long-term impact. And then, our fourth recommendation speaks to Jody and really the work that we learned around cybersecurity, and that if we were able to stand up a cybersecurity center of excellence and really harness a lot of the resources to help our small businesses get the training they need, the resources they need, and the supports they need to make sure that we are as cyber secure as possible and address that cyber posture needs that the Department of Defense has. And then as we move into the last deliverable on this grant and thinking about that front door and how we access, how we access this sector and can make it as easy as possible and reduce barriers and help address anyone who has questions, concerns, and needs, is really thinking through that portal and where does that portal sit and how do we service that? And we'll showcase the version of that in a moment. But that's also part of how this fifth recommendation is making sure that as a state, we still are investing in our North Dakota support agencies that do everything from supporting the small businesses and the entrepreneurs to the manufacturers and all of the government contracting needs that this particular sector has, and making sure that we still are supporting them. And as we continue to do that locally, all of those agencies are then able to take those local investments and then leverage them at the federal level. And so it is important that we continue to invest in those agencies and hopefully see the value in a portal like has been a part of this particular project. And so with that, I'm actually going to turn it over here to Norb and Joe to start really talking about the state portal and really our first go at putting some connectivity together via an online presence. So Norb and Joe, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning, or I got 2 minutes left before it's afternoon, so I can still say good morning. My name's Norb Biederman, and I'm part of the team that helped pull together the portal, as Amy likes to refer to it as the front door. And we're gonna have this grand unveiling, ribbon cutting ceremony, I suppose you might call it, of the portal this morning. But if we wind the tape back, there were three primary objectives in building out this portal. One was to create a database and portal to increase connectivity, one. Number two, to support the industry, the overall industry resiliency. And three, to promote North Dakota's defense supply chain. So those were really the three objectives of what we were trying to do. I'll distill it down to something as simple as be a better resource to our customers, one, and then two, be a better resource to each other. Because if we can do those two things, we can really move the needle on where we end up on these various ranking reports that Chip shared. And our goal is to move up that ladder and really put North Dakota front and center. My colleague in this effort, and I don't know if he's going to be on screen, but he certainly will be on voice, is Joe Craig from Idea Corps. And Joe, I'm turn the mic over to you, and you can walk the group through this morning the tool.
Thank you, Norb. Can you hear me okay, even though I'm not visible? Okay, good. And can you see the monitor with the software showing?
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you for that intro. Let me go through some of the information about our portal and give you some orientation towards it. So what we've got is, it's a compilation of both functionality and data. And the data comes from various sources. We're using things like sam.gov. We've included some Hoover's information. We've got supplier database info from FPDS and USA Spending. And so it's a conglomeration of many sets of data in order for us to present our companies in North Dakota and kind of consolidate in one spot. So let me get into the main part of the website. We've got some kind of a matrix of buttons here. One of our most important is searching specific companies, or what we might call competencies. So if I click on that, this is where there's some functionality behind the site based on that content that I talked about. And we're trying to enable folks to whether they want to find a partner or it's a contracting source that wants to find a potential winner for a contract and kind of review things. And this is set up in a sort of a wizard flow fashion. It's going to take you through. We try to make it easy to understand and follow by guiding you through. So it starts with product or services, and you can go by NAICS code if you want to. If you start typing in something like paint, for example, it's going to pop up and give you some suggestions on NAICS codes. Otherwise, you can just use the free format keywords. So let's go in here and just try something like robotics if we wanted that. And then we'll hit the next button here. And we have some other things that we can set as we pursue finding a list of resulting companies. We can choose set-asides. There's lots of choices here. I won't click through these, but just be aware that you can kind of zero in and filter. If I go to the next stage, we're setting the location of where the firms may be in the state, the county, the city, or the zip. The next one is, should the company be registered in SAM or not? The default, obviously the defaults cast a pretty wide net, so you don't really have to change things if you want to speed through. And indeed, you can actually skip right over to view results and click it if you don't want to go through this next process. The last thing, it says the company had a federal contract. Sometimes you want to find, primes or subcontractors, so we'll go there. The last step is going to view results. And so it's now looking through that, and it's going ahead and finding companies that had a robotics a presence. Okay, they might have had the word on their website or in other things that we look through. And so here's Ideal Aerosmith, for example, in Grand Forks. We have a firm score and some government score that tells something about their past ratings in terms of, have they done a lot of government business or not. And if we take a look at, we can get some more detail on the company. A great company with a lot of past government wins and low risk on the financial side. So if you can see, we're blending in a lot of data together. We have their website and a map and some other details about them. So that is a look at that portion. Let me go back to the home page and let's go down to another important part, which is a little more on the informational side rather than a function, but visit the resource hub. And that's an important thing that we worked hard on, to sort of segment and list all the important resources within the state that are relevant to this. We've got the PTAC, Impact Dakota, EDND, Dakota Business Lending, and so on, SBDCs, Defense Alliance. And we've gone ahead and given some tagging to each of these, so that if, for example, someone wanted to find assistance in the funding area, they could go ahead and click this on the left-hand side. Even things like meeting space, you can find that. You can see that they're tagged. And then, of course, we have the visit directly to the site if someone wanted to go there and see the site. Okay, so let's see here. Let me go back to the other tab, and let's go back to the home page. Those are our resources. And let's take a look at the next one, which is the tutorials. The tutorials are sort of broken down into the key areas that you may need help with your company. And getting registered to do federal business, identifying if you have set asides or not and learning a little bit about that. Of course, we have a bonus of finding some opportunities. There's another function on the portal of helping you find federal opportunities, writing a good proposal and delivering results. So for each one of these, if I click one, for example, here to write proposals on our set of tutorial learning things, of course, we can go back to our resources in the state. That's going to be sort of the internal set of helping things. We've got some videos, and then we've got helpful tips. So for example, how to prepare a government contract proposal. If I click that, I'm going to get an SBA document that'll help me learn more about preparing our proposal. So we try to, of course, this is subject to improving and expanding, and we welcome your input on these things over time. So this is just our initial, presentation of this content. Let's go back to home. And we have a little chat bot that you might be aware of. It's just sort of a simple thing that when you open it up here, we try to give a little, guidance if you want help on contracting opportunities or learning. If I wanted learning, for example, it'll take me back to tutorials. You can also message us directly, and we will get, if you leave your name and email, we'll get a notice, and we can respond to the visitors with more info. So that's a little chat bot. We also have a search box up at the top, excuse me. And if I put in something like funding, for example, it's going to give me the things on the site that may help me with that. And we can put in any relevant terms. We can even put in the company names. For example, if I'm looking for Impact Dakota, it's going to show up. And if I click it, I'm going to go over to the resource page and see my resources to find that. So that's a quick overview. Anything else any other questions? We have a few other miscellaneous things, ND by the numbers and a contact form, but that's a quick view. And I hope that you enjoy that.
Our hope and our goal is for you to use the tool, try to go out and break it, so to speak. And certainly myself and Chip are resources along with Joel on any content that you see that should be added, or things that are missing, or issues that you may or may not be having. But as Joe said and Amy indicated, our goal is to make this thing grow and grow and become a bigger and better resource for you, as well as a resource for our customer.
Thank you, Norb. And Pat, I think we can switch back to the other presentation. Thank you both. Oh, I have to show my screen. Hold on. All right. I think we're good. All right, excellent. Well, thank you both. I do appreciate your showcasing the portal and giving us a rundown of all the different features. As Norb said, this is a 1.0 version. It is a living space. And so as you use it, feel free to try and break it. We would love to hear your feedback. And so on this particular slide, you have Chip and Norb's email addresses, and they are a good first point of contact to help us continue as we move this portal forward and look to make this an excellent front door resource for the sector. And so with that, I'm actually going to turn it back over to Chip, who's going to talk about where do we go from here, and we'll begin Q&A shortly.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks, Joe and Norb, for that great presentation. And again, we really do encourage you all to go out to ndready.com and play with this thing. It's pretty powerful. Again, we've been involved in several different efforts, defense focused in the states, and there's such huge advantages here now. Thanks to OLDCC, we have this great 2-year study under our belts with actionable recommendations moving forward that we are going to act on. And now we have an interoperative tool here that, of course, is only as strong as the ecosystem that runs it. But because of that first piece, this is going to really fly. I think it's going to be huge. And in those other regions too, we've seen similar types of software online portals, but we haven't seen one that has the power that this has, thanks to IdeaCore. This is pretty significant, and if you really understood the power behind the algorithms and the multiple databases that run this thing, it's fantastic. And from a OLDCC perspective, I think we've served you well in the sense that this study and its steps going forward are all about making sure that North Dakota is ready and resilient and powerful for the defense supply chain for DoD and the customers that are out there protecting us. And this tool has that power that I think other folks don't have the advantages of. We'd like to end up franchising this eventually. It's that good. So good work on this idea core. So next steps, there are several. Obviously, the report itself has recommendations, but kind of taking a higher look at all this, we want to do these 5 things. Number one, following on in the last presentation, promote the portal itself, the online portal, and identify the changes we want to see to make this even better. And we all need you to be engaged in that process. Looking at the attendee list today, pretty impressive. It's, of course, the Grant Advisory Committee members, and then a whole lot more as this ecosystem grows. We've got prime contractors, small businesses, academia, nonprofits, government agencies, the whole ecosystem. Again, like everything in North Dakota, people show up, and that's really powerful. The next step is going to be applying for phase 2 funding of some sort through OLDCC and or another Pentagon agency. And then also searching for additional funding avenues, which Amy and I and the team are engaged on continually, whether it be through Small Business Administration or Department of Commerce and EDA, to continue to grow the resources needed to make sure that the ecosystem stays alive and well funded. And then a little repetitive here, but again, continuing the collaboration that has come about because of the Grant Advisory Committee's great work and the networking that's involved. We had a defense industry roundtable last year, and we're going to look at recreating that again here probably next year. And then finally, seeking additional partnerships for the defense sector with other state economic development efforts. And we alluded to this earlier, that this industry, the defense sector itself, is so diverse in terms of the technologies that our ultimate customers need. It really does touch on everything from autonomy to robotics to artificial intelligence to spin-offs from agriculture technology to a whole host of other industries that North Dakota plays in and is growing in. And so our aim is to work well with and substantially with Commerce, Impact Dakota, all the key players in the state that are interested in workforce and technology development, to make sure that we're sharing lessons with each other and growing the state economy as a whole holistically together. So those are next steps. And next slide, Amy, we'd like to turn it over to you to see if there's any key questions. And I just thought this would be kind of fun to remind us that we're here in large part to serve the ultimate customers for this industry that are out there protecting us every day. Here's a shot of USS North Dakota, somewhere out under the sea, protecting us as a fast attack submarine. I could tell you where it is, but then we'd have to kill you. So.
Pat, how are we doing?
Are there any questions
or comments out there in the attendee side?
Yep, comments are a little slow coming in. So if there's anything you'd want to elaborate a little bit more on, that would be just fine. As I start seeing some comments or questions come in, I will let you know.
All right.
Okay, so wondering about the website for the resources. Is it possible to put that back up on the screen?
Absolutely.
Sure.
I think it is. I think, Pat, you can probably help Joe do that.
I can.
If you don't mind, I think that's on your end.
Okay.
And while we're waiting to do that, for those that are interested, the web address for that, I know we mentioned it briefly, but it is ndready.com is the website address. And when you receive the presentation, there is a QR code in the presentation as well that will take you right to it as well.
Do they need any special credentials for login, Amy or Joe or Chip?
No, they do not. Not
No.
at this time. It is an open portal at this moment. There's no login credentials needed.
You should see it back on screen, hopefully. Is it visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll be happy to field any questions
Joe, one
about
of
it.
the questions that I fielded recently was related to the opportunities themselves that are out there. How different is this than just, if I'm a small business looking for an opportunity, or if I'm a major prime contractor looking for subcontractors? How is this different than just going to SAM website? Why is this better?
Well, the answer to that is the blending of the data that's behind it. So, for example, if you're looking for a contract partner, you're going to get some info on have they done government business before or not, versus just searching out there on the web, and you'll find their history much easier. You'll have all their contact info under your fingertips, including the mapping and that kind of thing. And of course, again, that bonus of opportunities is out there. So we're blending both sides. I didn't show that. I can just click it briefly if you'd like to see it. But that is, what we ideally would like to do is to have, if firms register eventually on the portal, we will know their NAICS codes and we will know their specific competencies. And then if those particular firms want to find an opportunity, we will do that more automatically. So that's a potential future benefit.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of things that you might want to consider in terms of what do you do next if you're a user of this portal is, number one, go out and look for yourself, number one, for sure, and vet the data that is out there. Number two, I think you can certainly think of it in the context of maybe utilizing the tool to look at your current supplier base of who you're utilizing today on how you build your product, services, or your technologies, because you'll be able to do some internal vetting on that. So that's an excellent resource for it. So those are a couple of great examples on where and how to maybe utilize the tool. And I think the third thing in terms of who is a targeted user within a company, it can be procurement, it can be sourcing, it can be manufacturing, programmatics, the program people, it can be engineering. So from a functionality standpoint, function-wise, it can be a tool for a variety of resources within your organization.
What I didn't get a chance to show.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, real quick, sorry. Just I didn't show before because I was zoomed in kind of tight, but there's a summary firm score, and that's sort of split up into a couple of parts, which is, the firm's history in doing business commercially, along with its history doing government business. So that's an interesting element to, address, Chip, that what would be different is you have those two pieces of data coming together to give sort of a composite score. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is pretty big. I had a question from Northrop Grumman, and that was similar to the SAM question. Well, why don't I just go to USA Spending, SAM, and look for companies there? And in that same question, it was, well, I can find those companies, but I just don't know how good they are, except for maybe I can see if they've had past contracts. And I think the firm score here is all about de-risking supply chain from a major prime contractor perspective. In part because some of those large firms don't do a lot of innovation themselves. They're looking for new and exciting innovation, which resides in small businesses and even in places like UND, DSU, where research is being done and the connection's not always being made to DoD, and that can happen through this level of connectivity right here.
Again, just to supplement, these types of settings are quite useful as well. In fact, what we did, which is unique towards this latter step, which you won't find on the typical settings, is we blended in the history of subcontract wins or OEM prime wins, and so that allows. There was a notion of finding contractors that were non-traditional defense suppliers, and so by setting this to companies that have not had a prime, then we're going to maybe zero in closer on those smaller firms that are non-traditionals. So those types of settings should be unique. Amy,
So there's one more question here about who should comments, questions, anything like that about this portal be directed to?
They would go to, for right now, Chip and Norb are taking those. So Norb. And we will make sure that his contact information is sent out as part of this information, and it is on the slides.
there is, just a supplement, there is an other down here in the chat if someone wants to have a quick on-ramp to that. And, you know, it says, share any additional details to help us assist you. If you say, you know, find contracts, and it's going to ask eventually for a name and email. And if I say that's all that I'm looking for, and we'll reply to you soon. I think it's because I had already put it in here. I'm probably registered, but it'll ask you for a name and email, and then that'll get to us as well.
Amy, I've got one last question here, and I think this is probably best for you, and that is, how do I, if I'm a small business, how do I stay connected to this ecosystem on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and how can I contribute? I mean, this is here to help my bottom line, but what about turning that around and helping this ecosystem and growing this together? How can I stay in touch?
So one way to do that would be to let myself know as one that, you know, we're trying to really coordinate the ecosystem at this point for the short term. And then beyond that too, I would recommend you could also contact the Small Business Development Center, your Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Those are organizations that's what we're here for, right? So we are here to help you stay connected to that ecosystem. So those are 3 local organizations that can help you as a small business stay connected to this ecosystem. And you know, we'll make sure between your local Small Business Development Center and the local PTAC and here at the Center for Innovation, you know, we can help make sure that you're connecting to that additional resource if we're not that right first point of contact.
Great. So not only is North Dakota the culture of yes, but we're also super efficient. So we're going to give everybody like 8 minutes of their life back here, and
Excellent.
opportunity to go to lunch as well.
Seeing we took some of their lunch away. I think that's a great idea.
That's true.
All right, thank you everyone for coming today. And again, we'll make sure that you receive these slides and a copy of the recording post today. So thank you very much for coming.
Bye, everybody.